Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into its own weight. Allow the day to ease a little without needing to disappear all at once. There is nowhere to hurry tonight, and nothing you need to finish before rest can begin. Only rain on stone, the shelter of long colonnades, and the warm, steady glow of lamps inside a great library near the sea. The evening we enter moves quietly. It asks for nothing more than slow steps, gentle hands, and the calm rhythm of one small task followed by another. If your thoughts drift, that is all right. The story will keep its gentle course. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called A Rainy Evening in the Great Library of Alexandria. By the time you reach the outer colonnade, the rain has already settled into a steady fall. It moves across the open court beyond the entrance in fine silver lines, darkening the paving stones and gathering in the shallow channels cut between them. The sky above the roofs has faded to a soft gray, and the last of the daylight is now so thin that the lamps inside the library seem warmer for it, their glow resting on pale walls and polished wood. You step beneath the shelter of the colonnade and leave the open weather behind. At once, the sound changes. Outside, the rain falls freely over stone, tile, and courtyard basin. Under the long covered walkway, it becomes quieter, softened by the roof above and the thickness of the walls beside you. The air still carries the cool scent of wet stone from the court, though beneath it comes another scent too. Lamp oil, dry papyrus, cedar shelves, and the faint dust of rooms that have held scrolls, tables, and careful work for many years. For a moment, you remain where you are and let the place settle around you. The colonnade runs ahead in a straight line, its columns pale in the low light, their bases darkened near the edge where stray rain has drifted in. Between them, the open side looks out across the court, where water touches the surface of a shallow basin and breaks it into small widening circles. Along the inner wall, several bronze lamps have already been lit. Their flames are steady, and their light falls in long amber shapes across the floor. You begin to walk. Your steps are quiet on the stone. The soles of your sandals no longer meet the slick surface of the rain-soaked paving outside, but the smoother, drier ground within the sheltered passage. Now and then you pass an open doorway leading further into the library, and each one offers a small glimpse of evening work already underway. A table laid with scrolls waiting to be tied, and returned, a wooden stand holding a roll half open beneath a lamp, a low shelf lined with labeled cylinders, each resting in its place. No one speaks loudly here. The few voices you hear are distant and measured, too soft to disturb the stillness. Most of what reaches you is the quiet life of the building itself. The shift of cloth as someone moves beyond a doorway, the almost soundless unrolling of papyrus, the light touch of wood against wood as a scroll case is set down on a table. You follow the colonnade until you come to a broad entrance framed by stone pillars slightly smoother than the others, worn by many passing hands. Inside lies one of the outer receiving rooms, where scrolls brought in from other chambers, houses, or ships are sorted before being taken further within. The room is lit by 3 lamps set at intervals along the wall, and their glow gives warmth to the cedar shelves that line the space from end to end. A man at the nearest table looks up as you enter, then nods in quiet recognition. He has already finished the larger part of the evening's work, and now stands beside a neat grouping of scrolls arranged in short rows. Some are tied with narrow linen bands. Others remain loose, their ends tucked in carefully. A small clay tablet rests beside them, marked with a short list of places where each is to be returned before the night grows later. He does not need to explain much. The task is a simple one and familiar. A few scrolls are to be carried to a reading room off the east passage. 2 are meant for a smaller catalog alcove beyond the inner court. One, older and more carefully wrapped than the rest, is to be taken upstairs to a quieter chamber where the air is drier, and the traffic of the day does not reach so easily. Nothing urgent, nothing heavy, only the evening work of putting each thing back into its proper place before the library grows still. You move to the table and rest your hands lightly beside the first group of scrolls. Even before you lift them, you can feel the difference between one and another. Some are slender and light. One is thicker, wound more tightly around its wooden rod. Another has been wrapped in a protective cloth that feels smoother beneath your fingers than the dry texture of papyrus alone. The linen ties are neat, and each tag has been written clearly enough to be read in the lamp glow without strain. You gather the first small bundle in both hands. The papyrus is dry and faintly warm from the room. The rods rest easily against your palms, and the balance of them encourages a slower step, not from weight, but from care. A single lamp burns near the doorway leading east, ready to light your way along the passage. And when you turn towards it, the bronze of its stand catches a brief line of gold before settling back into shadow. The eastern passage is narrower than the outer colonnade. Its ceiling is lower, and the walls on either side hold the day's warmth more closely. Alcoves appear at intervals, some empty, some containing shelves or small tables. Here the sound of the rain is gentler still. It reaches you not as a wide, open wash, but as a softened hush beyond stone. As you walk, the air changes a little. The outer spaces carried more of the weather inward. Here, deeper within, the scent of papyrus and cedar becomes clearer. There is also the faintest trace of soot from lamps that have been burning since dusk, and beneath that the dry mineral scent of plaster walls, smooth in some places, softly irregular in others. Your shoulder passes close to one as you round a corner, and for a moment the warmth stored their brushes against the cooler air moving through the passage. Ahead, the reading room opens gradually rather than all at once. First comes its light, warmer and broader than the lamplight in the corridor. Then comes the quiet shape of the entrance, and beyond it the long room itself, arranged in patient order. Several tables stand in rows with enough space between them for an easy, unhurried step. A few readers remain, though not many now. Each sits in a pool of low golden light with a scroll or writing board before them. The busiest part of the day has passed. Evening has slowed every movement. You pause just inside the doorway. Rain sounds faintly somewhere beyond the outer wall. A lamp burns near the center of the room, and others rest along the sides where the plaster curves into shallow niches. The tables show the soft marks of long use beneath the light, and the air is still enough that each flame rises straight. One man near the far end lifts a hand to turn a section of papyrus with steady care. A woman at the nearest table finishes a line of copying, sets her reed pen aside, and sits back for a moment before bending once more to her work. You carry the scrolls to an empty section of shelving along the wall. The tags guide you quickly. One belongs in the second bay between two works already resting there. Another goes lower, where the shelf is slightly deeper. You slide each one into place with care, aligning the ends so that nothing juts awkwardly forward. The dry whisper of papyrus against wood is almost too soft to hear, though in the quiet room it seems clear enough. When the last of the bundle has been returned, you let your hands rest for a moment on the smooth shelf edge. The cedar carries a faint resin scent that rises more fully where the wood has been warmed by the room. Behind you, the readers continue in silence. Ahead, at the far side of the chamber, a narrow opening leads towards the inner court where the night air moves more freely. Though you cannot yet see the rain from here, you can feel its nearness in the slight coolness that brushes the room now. And then, lifting the edge of warmth without disturbing it. You turn back towards the corridor, ready to collect the next small part of the evening's work. You turn from the shelf and follow the quiet line of the room towards the narrow opening at its far side, where the air feels cooler and the sound of the rain comes through a little more clearly. The change is slight at first. Behind you, the reading room remains warm with lamp glow and the low stillness of evening work. Ahead, the passage opens into a covered edge of the inner court, and the air there carries a fresher note, touched by rain and stone. You move towards it at an easy pace, your hands now empty, your steps light on the worn floor. As you reach the opening, the space beyond reveals itself in calm layers. Nearest to you is the sheltered walkway running along the side of the court, its roof supported by pale columns that rise from a low stone border. Beyond them lies the open center, where rain falls steadily into a broad paved square. A shallow basin stands at its heart, and water touches its surface in soft circles that widen and vanish almost at once. The paving stones around it are darker now, their color deepened by the rain, and their smoothness catches what little light reaches out from the surrounding rooms. You pause beneath the shelter and look across. The court is not large, but it feels enclosed and quietly held within the library's walls. Lamps burn at intervals under the covered walks on the far side, though their light does not travel far. Most of the brightness remains close to the walls, leaving the middle of the court to the rain, the basin, and the gathering blue-gray of night. Here the rain sounds different again. Outside the building, it had seemed broader, open to the sky, and spread across roofs and streets. In the colonnade, it softened beneath stone and tile. Here in the inner court, it becomes more precise. You hear it strike the paving in a finer pattern, touch the basin in delicate rings, and slip from the edges of the roof into the channels below. The sound is steady without being heavy. It fills the open square without disturbing the stillness around it. You begin to walk along the covered side of the court. The stone beneath your sandals is dry near the wall and cooler nearer the open edge, where the air carries in a fine trace of damp. To your left, the columns mark out a rhythm of light and shadow. To your right, the wall holds doorways and shallow recesses, some lit, some already dimmed for the night. In one recess stands a narrow bench. In another, a shelf built into the plaster holds several small ceramic jars, each sealed and labeled in a careful hand. The library feels different here from the reading room behind you. There, the quiet had the shape of people still occupied with the last part of their evening. Here, the quiet belongs more to the building itself. The rain takes the place of conversation. The air moves more freely. The open court draws the rooms around it into a single hush, linking each chamber to the next by water, stone, and the soft turning of the hour. You pass an archway leading to a smaller room where two lamps burn low beside a writing table. A set of reed pens lies neatly arranged on a folded cloth, their tips cleaned and set aside for the morning. Beside them rests a shallow dish of dark ink, covered now, and a smooth stone used to hold curling sheets flat while they are worked upon. No one is there. The work of the day has already withdrawn from that room, leaving only order behind it. Further along, another doorway stands partly open. Beyond it, shelves rise in shallow tiers, each holding rolled texts or small bundles wrapped in linen. A wooden ladder leans against the far wall, and a stool has been pushed back beneath a table as though its work ended only a short while ago. The lamp inside has not been extinguished yet, but its flame is lower than the others, giving the room a softer, duskier glow. You continue along the walk until you come to the far corner of the court. There the roofline dips slightly, and rainwater travels from one carved spout into a narrow channel below. The sound is clear but gentle, a steady silver thread against stone. From here you can look back and see the whole inner court at once. The basin in the center, the darkened paving, the lines of columns, the scattered lamps, and the open square of rain between them. Everything appears quieter than it did when you first entered, as though the weather and the library have settled into one another. Set into the wall just beyond the corner is the catalog alcove. It is smaller than the rooms you have passed, yet carefully made. A broad opening leads into a recess deep enough to hold shelves on three sides and a central table beneath a hanging lamp. The table is plain but well kept, its surface smooth from years of use. Along the shelves rest bundles of tablets, slim wooden labels, rolled lists, and smaller scrolls arranged with a precision that feels both practical and reassuring. Nothing is crowded. Nothing has been left carelessly placed. You step inside. At once, the air changes again. The rain is still closed, but the alcove holds more warmth than the covered walk outside. The lamp above the table gives a clear, even light that reaches the shelves without glare. Here the scents are drier: cedar, papyrus, warmed plaster, and the faint dust of records handled often, but kept in good order. On the table lies a stack of thin wooden slips, each marked with lines of careful writing. Beside them rests a shallow tray of clay tablets, some newly inscribed, others older at the edges from long use. A cord-bound roll sits half open beside a small weight of polished stone, as though someone had been checking a place reference, and then left only a short while before you arrived. There is no sign of haste in any of it. Even unfinished work here has been left neatly, ready to be resumed without confusion. The two scrolls meant for this alcove are still waiting in the receiving room behind you, but the place itself invites a moment's pause before you go to collect them. You rest your hand lightly on the table and glance along the shelves. Some hold group lists bound with linen ties. Others contain shorter rolls with tags hanging from one end, each tag cut to a slightly different shape depending on its use. One section is given over to slim wax tablets, stacked flat in pairs. Another holds small clay labels pierced through at one end, so they may be hung or tied. There is comfort in the simplicity of the arrangement. Each thing rests where it can be found easily beneath the steady lamp. Through the opening behind you, the rain continues to sound across the court. It seems close enough now to touch, though you remain fully under shelter. Cool air moves past the edge of the alcove and brushes the side of your face, then fades again into the warmer stillness near the shelves. The lamp flame above the table answers with the faintest tremor before rising straight once more. You turn and step back out into the covered walk. The court has grown a little darker while you stood inside. The basin now reflects only broken strips of gold where the nearest lamps reach it. The rest is rain-softened shadow. Somewhere across the square, a doorway closes with a muted wooden sound, followed by silence. No footsteps follow it. No voice breaks the air. The night inside the library continues to deepen by quiet degrees. You begin the short walk back along the court towards the reading room entrance. The path is familiar now. Columns pass one by one at your left shoulder. The paving beyond them shines under the rain. A small current of water threads along the carved channel near the wall, slipping steadily towards the basin, and then away again. Everything moves at its own untroubled pace. When you reach the opening to the reading room, the warmth of that space meets you once more. The readers remain, though fewer than before. One lamp near the far wall has been lowered, and the room seems broader for the dimmer light. The woman who had been copying earlier now sits with her hands folded for a moment over the table, her work paused. At the far end, a man rolls a text closed with slow care and ties it with a narrow strip of linen before setting it aside. Their quiet presence feels less like activity now than like part of the room's evening balance. You cross through without hurry and return to the East Passage. The receiving room lies beyond, unchanged except for the sense that time has moved forward while you were away. The three lamps still burn along the wall, but their glow is softer now. The man at the table has finished another small piece of work and stands near the shelves with his hands loosely at rest. When he sees you enter, he gives a slight nod towards the remaining pair of scrolls, as if to say that these are the next ones, and there is no more need for words than that. You move to the table and gather them. They are lighter than the first bundle, each one tied neatly and marked with its own tag. The papyrus feels dry beneath your fingers. One roll is narrow and firm. The other is a little broader, with a smoother outer wrap that catches the lamplight differently when you lift it. You check the labels once more, then turn back towards the passage leading to the inner court. The way is clearer now because you already know its shape. From the receiving room to the narrower corridor, from the corridor to the reading room, from the reading room to the covered side of the court, from there to the catalog alcove, waiting in its warm recess beside the rain. The movement from one space to another has become its own gentle rhythm, simple enough that your thoughts can loosen while your hands continue the work. You pass again through the reading room and follow the line of the court. The rain keeps its soft pattern across the open square. The lamps along the far walk burn lower. Cool air touches your wrists where your sleeves have fallen back slightly as you carry the scrolls. When you reach the alcove, you step inside and bring the two rolls to the central table beneath the hanging lamp. For a moment, you set them down and let your fingers rest on the smooth wood beside them. The room is still. The shelves wait in their quiet order. The rain sounds just beyond the threshold, and the lamp above gives more than enough light to read the small writing on each tag. This next part of the evening's work will be slower, more exact, and even quieter than what came before. You loosen the first linen tie. The linen gives easily beneath your fingers, and the knot falls away without resistance. For a moment, the loose ends rest against the table like pale threads in the lamp glow. You set the tie aside, then lift the scroll with both hands and turn it just enough to read the tag more clearly. The writing is small, though neat. A shelf reference has been marked near the top, followed by a shorter notation beneath it. The second line appears to direct the roll not to the open shelving, but to a grouped section of records kept together in the alcove itself. You glance towards the shelves on the left-hand wall, where several narrower compartments hold shorter rolls arranged by size, each with its own hanging label. The arrangement is simple once you see its order. One section holds group lists. Another holds catalog copies. A third contains short administrative records tied in sets. You carry the scroll to the appropriate shelf. The wood there is smooth from long use and slightly darker than the broader shelves in the reading room. Several rolls already rest within the compartment, their ends aligned with quiet care. You slide the new one into place between two others of a similar width and pause only long enough to make sure it sits evenly. The papyrus gives a soft, dry sound against the wood, then comes to rest. When you turn back, the second scroll remains where you left it on the table. This one is broader through the middle and bound more firmly, though its tag is clearer to read in the steady light. A small clay label lies tied beneath the written strip, pierced through and smoothed at the edges from handling. You lift it closer to the lamp and follow the marked line with your eye. It belongs not to the shelves, but to one of the flat storage drawers built into the lower section of the rear wall, where grouped records are kept wrapped and protected from dust. You kneel and pull the drawer out carefully. It moves with a quiet wooden slide. Inside lies a row of shallow bundles, each folded within cloth and fastened with narrow ties. The space smells faintly of cedar, dry fibers, and the still air of a compartment not opened often. You place the roll among the others where the numbering leaves a clear space for it, then adjust the cloth at one side so it lies flat again. When you ease the drawer shut, the front panel meets the frame with little more than a softened touch of wood. The first part of the task is done. You remain there for a moment beside the table, not because anything is uncertain, but because the alcove itself encourages slower movements. The lamp above you gives a clear, contained light, and beyond the opening, the rain continues to cross the inner court in a fine, steady pattern. The air near the shelves is warmer than the walkway outside, yet every now and then a cooler thread of night slips in at the edge of the doorway and passes over your hands. On the central table, the half-open cord-bound roll still rests beneath its polished stone weight. It had been left ready for someone to resume, though perhaps not until morning. The outer edge has curled slightly where the lamp has warmed it, and a few columns of tidy writing run down the exposed section. Beside it lies a stack of thin wooden slips, each marked with short references in the same patient hand. Some are newer, their edges pale and straight. Others have been handled enough to soften at the corners. You do not need to study each shelf for long to see how carefully the alcove is kept. Lists, labels, copies, and records rest in their places, each one easy to find beneath the steady lamp. You rest your fingertips lightly on the table and feel the faint warmth held in the wood beneath the lamp. From somewhere beyond the court comes the softened sound of rainwater traveling through a channel, then dropping into a basin or runnel below. It is not loud enough to draw your full attention, only present enough to shape the silence around it. Within the alcove, the shelves stand in still order. The clay tablets on their tray wait in neat rows. The lamp flame remains steady, though once or twice it gives the slightest movement and straightens again. At the far end of the table lies a small group of loose tags that appear not yet to have been matched back to their places. They have been set in a row rather than abandoned. Each one bears only a brief notation. One has a tiny nick along its edge, perhaps to distinguish it by touch as much as sight. Beside them sits a shallow cup filled with narrow linen lengths, cut ready for tying. A reed pen rests across the lip of a covered ink dish, cleaned and laid down for later use. Even the work left for later has been set aside neatly, ready for morning. You move along the shelves more slowly now, following the shape of the room with your eyes. A short row of tied bundles stands upright behind a wooden rail. Nearby, tablet pairs rest flat in careful stacks. Further along, hanging labels rest on pegs, their thin shapes casting narrow shadows against the wall. The air carries a drier scent here than in the reading room. Papyrus is strongest, followed by cedar, and the faint powdery note of warmed plaster. Beneath that comes the subtler smell of clay and old linen. It is a working smell rather than a decorative one, plain and steady, made of useful things kept in good order. When the cooler air from the court enters at the threshold, it brushes lightly across those scents without erasing them. You step back towards the opening and glance out across the inner court. The rain has darkened the paving further. What had gleamed earlier now shines only where a lamp reaches it from under the covered walk. The basin at the center catches a broken strip of reflection, then loses it again when the surface ripples. Across the square, one of the more distant lamps has been lowered or extinguished, and that side of the court has grown dimmer. The darkness sits gently there, not empty, but restful, as though the library is withdrawing from the edges inward. When you turn back, your eye falls once more upon the cord-bound roll left half open on the table. Its exposed section shows columns of place references and small marks beside them, some darker and newer than others. The polished stone weight holds the edge flat. Beside it, the slips and tablets remain exactly where they were left. You move to the tray of clay tablets and study them only by their arrangement. Some are marked more deeply than others. A few are bound in pairs by cord through a hole near one edge. Their surfaces catch the light differently from wood or papyrus, softer and more matte, with faint traces of thumb pressure still visible in places where they were once shaped. A small brush lies nearby, its bristles trimmed short, perhaps used to clear dust from incised lines before they are checked or copied. The linen ties rest coiled and ready. The slips lie in a measured row. The pen remains where it was placed. Nothing has shifted except the light and the hour. Outside, the rain continues. It is slightly finer now than it was when you first crossed the court, though no less steady. The paving answers with a softer sound. Water no longer falls from the roof edges in such frequent threads, but slips instead at wider intervals, each fall clear enough to be heard against the hush. The night air that enters the alcove carries no chill sharpness, only coolness enough to freshen the skin and remind you that the court is open above. You place both hands on the edge of the table and pause. The wood is smooth under your palms. The lamp above warms the back of your fingers. Cooler air touches your wrists. Rain sounds beyond the threshold. Somewhere deeper in the library, a faint footstep comes and goes. Your task in the alcove is complete, yet you remain a moment longer. Nothing here feels crowded or hurried. Each shelf and drawer holds only what it needs to hold, and the room keeps its quiet order. After a time, you lift the half-open roll just enough to slide the polished stone aside and ease the exposed edge inward by a careful turn. You do not close it fully, only enough to protect what lies open to the lamp and air. Then you set the weight back on the outer edge where it will keep the roll from shifting. You straighten the nearest row of wooden slips by the smallest measure. One had drifted slightly out of line. Now it sits true with the others. You set the reed pen more securely across the covered dish. Then you gather the loose linen tie left from the first scroll and place it neatly beside the cup of unused lengths, where it may be found without confusion later. The room would have remained orderly without these small adjustments, yet they suit the quiet of the hour. When at last you step back from the table, the alcove seems complete once more. The shelves hold their records in silence. The drawer remains closed. The slips and tablets rest under steady light. The open view to the court remains the only soft movement nearby, where rain touches stone and passes through shadow. You take one more look across the room, then turn towards the opening. Outside, the covered walk waits with its cooler air and the pale rhythm of columns. Beyond it lies the stair that leads upward into quieter rooms where older texts are kept away from the heavier movement of the day. Your path leads there next. You step from the catalog alcove into the covered walk again. Rain crosses the open court in a fine dark veil, and the paving catches broken strips of light beneath it. Behind you, the alcove lamp remains steady over the table and shelves. Across the square, beyond the columns and the falling water, a stair rises from the far passage towards the upper rooms. You turn and make your way towards it. By the time you are halfway across the covered walk, the court has darkened further. The basin at its center now holds only scattered fragments of reflection, broken apart by the rain almost as soon as they appear. Water moves between the paving stones in thin silver lines and slips towards the shallow channels cut to carry it away. Under the roofed edges, only a few lamps remain, each one lighting a small space and leaving the rest to shadow. You continue along the sheltered side. The air is cooler here than it was in the alcove. It brushes your face and hands with a faint trace of damp, though the stone beneath your sandals remains dry close to the wall. At the open edge, the columns rise one after another, their surfaces pale where the nearest flame touches them, and darker where the light falls short. Between them, the rain crosses the square in a fine, even curtain. To your right, the wall is broken by recesses and doorways spaced at measured intervals. One opening reveals a room already nearly dark, with only the lowest edge of a lamp still showing against the far plaster. Another has been closed for the night. In a shallow niche, a wooden bench stands empty, its surface worn smooth along the front edge. Below it, a narrow runnel carries water, so quietly that you hear it only when you pass close by. Nothing in this part of the library feels hurried now. The voices from the reading room no longer reach this far. The work in the catalog alcove has been left behind. What remains around you is the sound of rain touching stone, the small movement of water through channels, and the light rhythm of your own steps beneath the roof. As you walk, the court opens and narrows between the columns. At one point, the covered way broadens slightly, giving a clearer view across to the far side. The paving below shines where the rain has polished it. The basin holds a brief strip of gold from one distant lamp, then loses it again when the surface stirs. Beyond, the opposite passage lies dim beneath its roofline, and at its corner the stair becomes easier to see, rising in a plain stone line towards the upper level. You move on at the same untroubled pace. A bronze lamp fixed to the wall burns lower than the others, its small flame resting deep within the dish. The plaster behind it is marked by years of smoke near the bracket, though the surrounding wall has been kept clean. The light from it is modest, enough to catch the edge of a doorway, the corner of a ledge, the curve of a column base, and then no more. Near the end of the walk, the space draws inward. The wall on your right steps back to form a small landing apart from the main passage. A stone block stands beside it at waist height, plain and well used, perhaps for setting down bundles before they are carried further in. Tonight it holds nothing. Next to it rises the stair. It begins without ceremony. The first step lifts from the landing in a simple line of worn stone, the center of each tread smoothed by many years of passing feet. A wall follows the ascent on one side. The other remains open only for the first few steps before turning inward. Halfway up, a lamp burns in a niche, and its light falls across the lower treads in a muted band. You stop at the foot of the stair and glance back across the court. From here, the open square seems deeper and more distant than it did from below. The columns of the covered walk stand in a quiet rhythm between you and the rain. The catalog alcove is no more than one warm opening among several, its lamp steady, but modest now that you have moved away from it. The basin lies dark at the center, disturbed only by the constant touch of water. You turn back and place your hand against the wall as you begin to climb. The surface is cool and dry beneath your palm. The first few steps still hold some trace of the open court behind you, and the rain remains clear enough in the air to follow. Then, little by little, the sound begins to soften. It does not disappear. It simply falls further away with each tread, becoming part of the distance rather than the whole space around you. The lamp in the niche burns with a steady flame as you pass it. Its light reveals the faint hollowing at the center of the steps, and the softer sheen on the wall where many hands have brushed against it over time. Near the edges, the stone remains sharper. At the middle, it has been worn into a gentler curve. The stair has carried years of small journeys like this one, upward and down again, always by measured steps. Above the lamp, the stair turns. Once you round the corner, the court drops almost entirely from sight. Only a deeper darkness behind you suggests the open space below. The air changes here. It is no longer touched so directly by rain. In its place come the drier scents of plaster, old wood, lamp oil, and the faint trace of linen kept in rooms that do not open often to the weather. Your footfalls sound different now as well. Below, the open court took them and let them go. Here, the walls hold them closer. Each step returns a softened echo that fades quickly into the stairwell. The climb is not long, yet it separates one part of the library from another with quiet certainty. You continue upward. Ahead, a second lamp burns somewhere along the passage above, though its light reaches the stair only faintly. It marks the top landing without revealing much beyond it. The shadows here gather closer to the walls and doorways, leaving the space between them dim and enclosed. When you reach the upper level, you pause. The passage before you is narrower than the covered walk below and lower in its proportions than the larger rooms on the ground floor. Along one side stand jars with fitted lids, wooden chests, and a folded cloth left neatly atop one of them. On the other side, a series of doorways runs along the wall. Some are closed with plain wooden panels. One stands slightly open, enough to show the outline of shelving within. Another is covered by a hanging cloth that stirs only faintly in the still air. The scents are different here. Rain reaches this level only as a distant freshness from the stair behind you. Nearer at hand are cedar boards, dry fibers, clay, and the subdued smell of rooms kept carefully shut against damp and glare. Nothing feels neglected. Everything has the preserved quality of objects stored with intention and left undisturbed until needed. You step forward from the landing. The floor of the passage is smoother than the stair and quieter underfoot. The lamp farther ahead catches the rims of jars, the corner of a chest lid, and the lower edge of the wall before giving way to shade again. One doorway on your left reveals shelving within a small room. Another remains closed, the latch resting in place. Farther along, the passage bends out of sight. Behind you, the rain continues below the level of the stair. It has become a distant thread now, quieter than the enclosed hush of the upper floor. Ahead, the older rooms wait in dimmer air, where wrapped texts and stored records have been kept away from heavier use and shifting weather. You stand for a moment with the stair behind you and the upper passage before you. Then you move on towards the deeper rooms and along the upper passage at an easy pace. The stair behind you has already sunk into dimness, and with it the clearer sound of the rain below. What remains of the weather here is no more than a faint coolness at the edge of the air. Around you are drier scents: cedar, clay, old plaster, lamp oil, and folded linen kept in rooms where damp does not easily reach. A lamp further along the wall burns low and steady. Its light falls in a narrow band across the passage, catching the shoulder of a storage jar, the corner of a chest, and the lower part of the plaster opposite before fading again. Between those touches of light, the floor remains subdued beneath your steps. On your right, the first door is shut. The next stands slightly open, not wide enough to show the whole room beyond, only the edge of a shelf and a deeper stillness within. A folded cloth rests on the lid of a chest nearby, laid there neatly rather than left in haste. Further on, the passage bends out of sight. You slow at the doorway and rest your hand lightly against the wood. The frame is darkened by age, and use smooth in places where hands have passed often. The latch hangs loose, not fastened, only resting where it fell when the door was last drawn back. The air just inside feels more settled than the passage, carrying the dry scent of stored fibers and old boards. You ease the door wider and step in. Shelves line two walls from waist height upward. Beneath them stand cedar chests of different widths, some closed with fitted lids, others fronted by sliding panels. Along the far wall rests a taller cabinet divided into narrow compartments sized for wrapped bundles and slender cases. A lamp burns on a bracket near the corner, giving enough light to show the shape of the room without brightening every part of it. At once the chamber feels more enclosed than the spaces below. The air is dry and even. Sound stays close. The brush of your sleeve, the shift of your breath, the faint contact of your sandal on the floorboards all seem to remain within the room instead of traveling outward. Linen-wrapped bundles rest in shallow rows. Slim cases lie side by side within the cabinet. A few clay jars stand in the corner with fitted lids, their surfaces dull in the low light. Near the door, on a small side stand, rests a wrapped roll waiting to be put away. It is not large. The linen has been folded twice and tied at the center with a narrow band. A tag hangs from the knot, its writing fine, but clear enough to read by the wall lamp. The mark directs it not to the open shelves, but to one of the slimmer compartments in the cabinet at the far side of the room. You lift it with both hands. The wrapping is smooth and dry beneath your fingers, firmer than papyrus alone, and slightly cooler where the cloth lies double. The weight is light, but scented enough to make you support it properly as you cross the room. At the cabinet, you pause and read the tag once more. The compartments are narrow and orderly. Some hold cylindrical cases. Others contain bundles wrapped in linen of different shades and textures. A few are marked by small hanging labels. One space near the center remains open, no wider than needed for the roll in your hands. You slide the bundle into place. Cloth meets wood with the faintest contact, then settles. You adjust it by a finger's width so its front edge sits level with the others. The tag comes to rest where it can still be read without being turned. On the shelf below sits a shallow cedar case with its lid pushed back a little way. Inside are several slim tools or rods, each wrapped separately and laid in its own groove. Beside the case lies a folded square of linen and a small brush with short bristles, both set down neatly after use. You let your gaze move around the room more slowly. A lower shelf holds flat bundles tied with broader strips of cloth. Another keeps a row of cases, each capped at the end, and marked by a small band of darker wood. In one corner stands a narrow stool tucked partly beneath a work ledge no wider than needed for setting down a bundle or opening a case. On the ledge rests a covered oil dish and a folded length of linen, with nothing else to crowd the surface. The room feels tended, then left to rest. A cloth folded, a case not quite shut, a stool returned beneath the ledge. You cross to the nearest chest and rest your hand on its lid. The cedar gives off a faint resin scent where the wood has held the warmth of the room. The grain beneath your palm is smoother in some places than others, softened over time by use. A narrow label tied to one side lies flat against the front. Somewhere far below, beyond passage, stair, and court, the rain continues. Here it reaches you only as distance. What shapes this chamber instead is the dryness of stored cloth, enclosed air, and wood fitted closely enough to keep out dust and shifting weather. On the side stand near the door lies a second item, smaller than the first. At first glance, it appears to be only a folded wrapping cloth, but beneath it rests a thin bundle protected by two stiff boards tied together with linen. The outer tag has slipped slightly to one side. You straighten it and read the marking. This one belongs on a lower shelf against the left wall, among other flat-wrapped pieces stored side by side. You carry it there and kneel. The shelf sits just above the cedar chests, deep enough for the bundles to lie without overhang. Several are already in place, each tied and aligned so the tags can be read at a glance. You lower the thin bundle into the open space between two others and ease it back until the front edges form a clean line. Then you ready the shifted tag so it hangs neatly again. You remain there for a moment, looking along the shelf. Cloth, board, tie, label. Repeated forms, each a little different in wear and shade. When you rise, the darker parts of the room feel easier to read than they did at first. The upper shelves recede into softer shadow. The cabinet fronts hold a muted sheen. The floorboards show the grain of the wood where feet most often pass between door, cabinet, shelf, and ledge. You move to the work ledge and smooth the folded linen by a small measure. One corner had lifted slightly. Now it lies flat. You set the brush a little further back from the edge, where it is less likely to be knocked aside by the next hand that uses the space. Beside the covered oil dish stands a tiny clay weight, no larger than a plum stone. You leave it where it is. Nothing more needs doing here tonight. The cabinet compartment is filled. The lower shelf holds an even row once more. The ledge is clear and ready for morning. You stand for a moment near the center of the chamber. The silence here differs from the spaces below. There is no open court beside it, no moving air under a roofed walk. What remains instead is enclosed stillness, close and dry, held by thick walls, fitted wood, and cloth laid away from weather and light. At the doorway, the passage beyond waits in dimness. The smaller lamp outside leaves a low band of light across the threshold, while further along the corridor, the upper bend remains partly hidden. Other rooms lie ahead, each one a little further within the library than the last. You turn towards the door and step back into the passage. Behind you, the chamber remains slightly open, allowing only a narrow strip of light to fall across the floor before the bend in the corridor takes it out of sight. Ahead, the upper level grows dimmer. The air is close and dry, holding the faint scent of old plaster, folded cloth, and oil warmed by a low flame. The passage turns gently to the left. Beyond the bend, a smaller lamp burns in a wall niche, turned low for the hour. Its light reaches only part of the way along the corridor, enough to show a narrow stool against the wall, a plain wooden door standing ajar, and the edge of a shallow shelf built into the plaster nearby. You slow as you approach. This doorway is lighter than the one you have just left. Even before you step inside, you can see the end of a workbench, a folded cloth laid across it, and the corner of a shallow tray catching the lamp. You rest your fingers against the door and ease it open a little further. The room reveals itself gradually. A long, narrow bench runs beneath the wall on one side, its surface mostly clear, with a few objects spaced apart with care. Above it hangs a shelf holding folded linen in small, even stacks. Against the opposite wall stands a lower table with two shallow trays placed side by side. Near the corner, a reed basket holds rolled cloths and spare wrappings. A lamp burns on a bracket above the bench, giving enough light to work by while leaving the outer edges of the room in shade. You step inside. The chamber is smaller than the storage room behind you, though arranged just as carefully. Cloths, brushes, ties, trays, and boards have taken the place of heavier chests and deeper shelving. The air carries a faint powdery note from dry fibers and surfaces that have been kept clean. At the center of the bench lies a narrow, wrapped roll waiting to be finished for the night. Its linen has already been folded around it, though one end remains open. Beside it rests a small brush with pale bristles, a wooden tool no wider than a finger, and a shallow dish holding lengths of linen cord coiled into tidy rings. A second cloth lies nearby, finer and smoother than the first, ready to cover the final fold. You move to the bench and stand before it. The wood beneath your hands is smooth at the edge and slightly warmer near the lamp. One tray on the table behind you holds a few narrow tags laid side by side. The other contains two wrapped bundles, each resting on its own folded cloth. You begin with the brush. Lifting it lightly, you pass the bristles once along the exposed end of the roll where the inner layers show. The touch is gentle. It clears the surface without disturbing it. Then you set the brush back in its groove and turn to the cloth. The linen is soft from use and careful washing, but still firm enough to hold its shape when folded. You draw the open end over with both hands, bringing one side in first, then the other, smoothing each fold with the flat of your fingers, so no corner sits awkwardly. The roll beneath remains light yet definite, guiding the cloth into place. When the final edge lies flat, you lift one of the cords from the dish and wind it once around the center, then again near the end, tying each knot firmly enough to hold without drawing the cloth too tight. For a moment, you leave your hands resting on the wrapped roll. The flame on the wall bracket gives a low, even light. Somewhere beyond the passage, far enough away to be little more than a softened presence, the rain continues below this floor. Here it reaches you only as distance. You lift the finished roll and turn to the nearer tray. The tray has been lined with folded cloth to soften whatever is placed there. You lower the wrapped piece into the empty space beside the others and adjust it so the ties face upward and the folds lie neatly. Then you take one of the narrow tags from the second tray, read the marking, and set it beneath the linen cord where it can be seen at a glance in the morning. The tray looks complete with the third bundle in place. You glance along the bench once more. A length of linen lies partly unrolled near the corner. You fold it back into an even strip and place it with the others on the shelf above. The wooden tool rests slightly askew, so you align it beside the brush. A small covered jar near the lamp has been left a little too close to the clear working space. You move it back by an inch, enough to leave the bench open. On the lower table, one of the folded cloths beneath the remaining bundles has shifted at the corner. You smooth it flat. The cloth yields easily beneath your fingertips. Its weave finer than the wrappings used in the storage room. Beneath it, the tray is polished smooth from repeated use, darker where hands have lifted, and set things down over time. The second bundle remains undisturbed, its outer fold sharp and even. Above the bench, the stacked linens hold their pale shapes in the low light. Some are thicker, some finer, each folded to a slightly different width according to use. Near them rests a row of narrow boards, perhaps for supporting flatter pieces while they are wrapped or checked. Beside the reed basket hangs a loop of spare cord, its ends tucked through themselves, so it does not unwind. At the far end of the bench lies a shallow board holding several unused tags. One has slipped half beyond the edge. You slide it back into line with the others. Beside it rests a small weight of smooth clay, used perhaps to hold cloth or labels steady while hands are occupied elsewhere. You leave it where it is, scented on the board. Nothing more needs doing here tonight. The wrapped roll rests in its tray. The tools lie in place. The spare cloths are folded. The bench is ready for morning. You stand for a moment near the lamp and let the room settle around you. The air is warmer near the bracket and cooler near the floor. The scent of linen is strongest here, joined by a faint trace of dried fiber and the softened oil note from the lamp. The room remains still, with only the low flame and your own breathing near at hand. At the doorway, the corridor beyond waits in muted shadow. The bend you followed to reach this room now hides the passage behind it. Further within the upper level, other chambers still lie beyond sight, more removed from the open court and the weather below. This room, with its trays and folded cloths, has been left ready for the next careful hands. You turn towards the door. As you step back into the corridor, the light from the workroom falls briefly across the floor at your feet, then remains behind you, low and steady, over bench, trays, brush, cord, and folded linen prepared for the morning. Its light remains visible for a little while at your back, a low strip across the floor and lower wall until the bend of the corridor draws it out of sight. Ahead, the upper level grows more withdrawn. The air feels drier here and more settled. Even the scent of oil from the lamps is fainter now, giving way to older wood, folded linen, plaster, and the quiet closeness of rooms that are opened only when needed. The corridor narrows a little as it goes. The walls seem thicker here than in the passage near the stair, and the intervals between doorways grow longer. A small lamp has been left in a niche at shoulder height, though its flame is turned, so low that it offers shape more than brightness. In its light, you pass a shallow recess containing nothing but a folded cloth and a narrow stool, then a closed panel set flush into the wall, plain enough that it might be missed if not for the small bronze catch fixed near one edge. You walk on at the same measured pace. Your sandals give almost no sound against the floor. What little does rise is softened at once by the close walls and the low ceiling. The weather below has withdrawn almost entirely now. If the rain still falls beyond the court and stair, it no longer reaches this part of the library in any direct way. Only the faintest coolness, carried from further back in the building, reminds you that the night outside still continues. Ahead, the passage turns once more. Beyond the turn, a heavier doorway stands recessed within a deeper frame of wood and plaster. The panel is darker than the others you have passed, not polished, but rubbed smooth at the height where hands have most often touched it. A hanging cloth has been drawn back to one side within the frame, leaving the entrance partly open. The cloth itself is plain, closely woven, and heavier than the wrappings used in the rooms behind you. It hangs without movement in the enclosed air. You slow as you come to it. The room beyond is dimmer than the workroom and less easily read from the threshold. You do not see a bench or tray at once, nor the broader shapes of chests beneath shelves. Instead, there is a deeper arrangement of shadowed recesses, separated spaces, and a lamp set further within, its light held close among the shelves. You place one hand against the doorframe and step through. At once, the chamber gathers around you with a different weight. It is not large, yet it feels deeper than the rooms behind it because so much of it lies in recess and partial shade. The walls are lined not with open shelving alone, but with a series of bays set back into the thickness of the structure, some open, some closed by sliding wooden fronts drawn only halfway aside. Beneath these recesses runs a lower ledge of cedar boards smoothed from long use. Above, the ceiling feels a little lower, the corners dimmer, the air more contained. A lamp burns in a bracket near the far wall. Its light is enough to show the room clearly once your eyes adjust, but it does not travel far beyond what it touches directly. One recessed bay holds a row of wrapped rolls resting side by side upon cloth-lined boards. Another contains flatter pieces protected between thin wooden covers and tied with narrow bands. Further along, several narrow cases stand upright in separate slots, each one set apart from the next so that no piece presses too closely against another. The arrangement is sparer than in the other rooms. Fewer things are kept here, with more room left between them. You remain near the doorway for a moment and let the chamber settle before you. The air has a distinct dryness, not brittle, but well guarded from damp. It carries cedar, linen, old fiber, and a faint powdery trace from cloth, and boards that have been undisturbed for long stretches of time. No current moves through the room. No doorway stands open to a court or passage beyond. Even the flame in the wall bracket rises almost perfectly straight. Near the entrance, on a stand no wider than a single folded cloth, rests a wrapped roll waiting to be returned to its place. Its outer linen is thicker than the wrappings you handled in the smaller workroom, and beneath it you can feel a firmer shape, as though another protective layer lies below the cloth. A narrow tag hangs from the binding cord. The writing is small, with a shelf mark, and a second notation beneath it. In the light from the bracket, you can make out the reference to one of the deeper recesses along the inner wall. You lift the roll with both hands. Its weight is still manageable, though greater than the pieces you handled in the earlier rooms. The balance sits low and steady in your palms. The cloth is dry and slightly textured beneath your fingers, the weave stronger, the fold at each end more thickly built. As you carry it across the room, the floor gives only the faintest muted answer underfoot before returning to silence. At the wall of recessed bays, you pause to read the tag once more. The recess you need lies midway along the row, partly screened by a sliding wooden front drawn open to the width of a hand and a half. Inside, a cloth-lined board extends into the depth of the compartment. Two wrapped rolls already rest there, one set slightly back, the other nearer the front, with space left between them for a third. You place the carried roll on the cedar ledge below the bay and reach for the sliding panel. The wood moves smoothly in its groove, though with a little more weight than a lighter door or lid. You draw it wider just enough to allow your hands to pass without brushing the sides. The interior of the recess is darker than the room itself, the cloth lining pale against the shadowed depth. It has been arranged not only to hold the rolls, but to keep them from shifting against the wood or one another. You lift the bundle again and guide it into the prepared space. The cloth beneath receives it with almost no sound. You ease it inward until its front edge sits level with the roll nearest it, then make the smallest adjustment so the three rest in a clean row, each with its tag visible where it can be read without turning. The spacing is deliberate. Nothing touches too closely. Nothing leans. For a moment, you keep your hands there, one at either side of the newly placed roll, making certain it has settled fully. Then you draw them back. The recess now appears complete. The pale lining runs beneath the three wrapped forms in a quiet, even strip. The deeper corners remain shaded, though the front edges of the cloth and cords catch the lamp just enough to mark their shapes. The compartment does not feel full. It feels properly held. You slide the wooden front partway back across the opening, not to close it entirely, only to leave the bay sheltered as the others are sheltered, with enough space still open to read the tags and reach the contents when required. The panel stops with a low wooden contact against its frame. The sound is so slight that it seems to disappear into the room rather than travel through it. Beneath this bay, on the lower ledge, lies a flat piece protected between two thin boards. It has already been tied, though the cord at one corner has twisted. The tag attached to it has slipped partly underneath the binding, making the writing harder to see at a glance. You kneel and straighten both. The boards are smooth and dry, their edges worn softer where hands have lifted them over time. You ease the cord flat against the surface, then draw the tag forward so it hangs clear once more. The movement is a small one. When it is done, the piece lies exactly as before, only easier to read and less likely to catch awkwardly when next it is lifted. You remain kneeling for a moment longer and look along the lower ledge. Other protected pieces rest there at intervals, each with its own space left between it and the next. Cloth, board, tie, tag, repeated forms again, though not crowded together. The ledge itself shows the soft luster that cedar takes on when it has been touched often enough by careful hands and kept free from dust. When you rise, your gaze moves towards the narrow slots further along the wall. Several cases stand there upright, each one darker than the wrapped bundles, their surfaces marked by grain, age, and the slight variation that comes from different pieces of wood shaped for the same purpose. A few have small tied labels resting against their fronts. One slot stands empty, a slim dark gap between its neighbors, ready for whatever may later be returned there. Near the far corner, a small stand holds a folded cloth and a brush laid across it. The brush is finer than the one in the wrapping room, its bristles shorter and more closely bound. Beside it rests a shallow covered dish and a smooth clay weight no larger than a walnut. None of these things need touching now. It is enough to see that they have been left ready, each object given its own place and enough clear space around it. You cross to that part of the room and rest your fingertips lightly on the folded cloth. The linen is cool and smooth. Its upper fold has lifted slightly at one corner, perhaps when the brush was last set down. You smooth it flat, then place the brush more squarely across the center, so it cannot drift near the edge. The small clay weight remains where it is, its dull surface catching only the slightest point of light. The chamber grows quieter the longer you remain in it, not because anything changes, but because your own presence settles to its pace. The lamp continues with the same restrained flame. The recesses keep their dim interiors. The air remains dry and enclosed, carrying no more than the faint, steady scent of wood, cloth, and old fiber protected from weather. There is no sense of abandonment here, only of trust. Things set back carefully, where they may rest undisturbed until required again. You move once more along the wall of bays, letting your eyes pass from one recess to the next. A wrapped roll set slightly deeper within its lined space. A board-protected piece resting flat with its tag lying clear. A narrow case upright in its separate slot. A sliding front half drawn to shelter what lies beyond it. The arrangement is simple, though it asks for slow attention. At the far end of the room, beneath the bracket lamp, a final recess holds only one piece. A broader bundle wrapped in layered cloth and resting alone on its own board. Enough space has been left around it that the shadows at either side seem part of its keeping. You do not approach it. It is enough to see it there, further in than the others, preserved within its own quiet distance. You return to the center of the room and stand a moment without moving. The task that brought you here is done. The deeper bay holds its 3 wrapped rolls. The cord and tag on the flat piece lie properly. The cloth and brush at the far stand have been left ready. Nothing more needs adjusting tonight. At the doorway, the heavier hanging cloth remains drawn back where you first found it. Beyond it lies the dim passage, then the smaller workroom, the storage chamber, the stair, the court, and the rain far below. Here in this inner archive room, those things feel very distant indeed. The night has drawn deep into the library now, and this chamber is one of the places where it comes most fully to rest. You turn towards the entrance and walk back across the room. As you pass through the doorway, your shoulder brushes lightly by the hanging cloth. It answers with the faintest movement and then falls still again. Behind you, the lamp remains low over the recesses, the lined compartments, the separated cases, and the older bundles kept back from weather, traffic, and light. You leave the inner archive room and step back into the upper passage. The heavier cloth at the doorway settles behind you without a sound. Ahead, the corridor runs on in low light, its floor dim beneath the wall lamps turned down for the hour. The air feels slightly less enclosed here than in the room you have just left, though it still carries the same dry character of the upper level. Plaster, oil, linen, old wood, and the faint trace of fibers kept away from damp. You move on at an unhurried pace. The floor beneath your sandals is smoother here than the stair, and quieter than the boards within the deeper rooms. One stretch of wall runs plain and unbroken for several steps, then gives way to a narrow recess holding a small stool and a folded cloth left upon it. Further on, the passage turns slightly, and beyond that turn, a softer band of light lies across the floor, warmer and more local than the light from the corridor lamps. As you draw nearer, the source becomes clear. A small chamber stands partly open on the left, and within it a lamp has been left burning near a work surface. The light does not spread far into the passage, but it is enough to show the lower edge of the door, the curve of a stool leg, and the corner of a narrow table within. From where you stand, the room already feels different from the others above. There is less storage in its shape, more immediate use. You pause at the threshold and rest your hand against the frame. The wood is dry and smooth where many fingers have passed over time. The room beyond is neither dark nor bright, only held within a close circle of working light. A writing table stands along one wall with a stool drawn slightly back from it. A second, smaller surface stands opposite, holding a few items set aside with care. Along the wall above the main table runs a shallow shelf carrying rolled cloths, a stack of boards, and a narrow box with its lid closed. You ease the door a little wider and step inside. At once the scent changes. It is still dry here, but finer and more immediate than in the archive room. Lamp oil is present, though lightly. Beneath it comes the faint scent of ink, old fiber, smooth wood, and cloth used to cover or protect the work. The chamber is small enough that each object seems to remain within easy reach of the next. Nothing has been left out in quantity. Only a few things remain visible, and each appears to have been in use not long ago. The writing table stands beneath the lamp. Its surface is clear in the middle, but not empty. Near the center lies a text still partly open, its edge resting beneath a small, smooth weight to keep it from curling back fully. Beside it sits a covered ink dish, the lid placed on, but not turned fully into place. A reed pen rests on a narrow wooden support laid across the table edge. A folded drying cloth lies nearby, one corner fallen loose. Further along stands a low tray with two narrow boards stacked together and a short row of finished pieces set beside them. You move closer and stand before the table. The stool has been drawn back at a slight angle, as though the person working here rose only a short while before the night deepened further. The lamp above casts a lower, more focused light than those in the storage rooms. It falls directly across the open text, the ink dish, the pen rest, and the front edge of the table, leaving the corners of the room in softer shadow. For a moment, you look at the work just as it was left. The open text is not spread wide, only partly eased out, enough for a final line to be checked or copied before the work was set aside. The visible section shows narrow columns of writing, dark enough to remain clear in the lamp's low reach. The smooth weight near one edge keeps the material flat without pressing heavily upon it. Nothing appears abandoned. Everything suggests a pause made with the intention of returning, though not before morning. You begin with the text itself. Placing your fingertips lightly near the outer edge, you lift the weight with the other hand and set it aside for a moment. Then, with slow care, you ease the open section inward by a small turn, not closing it entirely, only bringing it back far enough that the exposed surface is protected from the air and lamp. The movement is gentle and even. When the edge rests in a safer line, you place the smooth weight back near the outer fold, where it will keep the piece from shifting in the night. Next, you turn to the drying cloth. One corner has slipped across the table's clear working space. You lift it, fold it into a neater square, and place it just beyond the pen rest where it no longer intrudes upon the center of the surface. The cloth is soft and lightly worn, its fibers finer than the wrapping linen kept in the upper rooms behind you. It settles neatly, holding its fold with little effort. The reed pen lies where it was set down, though not quite fully within its rest. You take it up carefully and lay it more squarely across the wooden support so that its tip is protected and its balance secure. The pen is light in your fingers. When you release it, it remains exactly where it should, neither rolling nor leaning. Then you reach for the ink dish. The lid has been placed on top, but not fully seated. You adjust it with a small turn until it closes properly, leaving the dish covered against dust and the slow drying of the remaining ink. The sound it makes is slight, more a settled touch than a click. Once closed, it gives the table a more finished look, as though the last act of working has finally been completed. To one side of the table stands the low tray with the narrow boards. You glance over them and see that the upper board has shifted a little off true. You square it with the one beneath, Then align the finished pieces beside them, so their edges run cleanly together. There are only a few, enough to show that the work of the room is careful and measured rather than hurried or abundant. A small strip of cloth lies beneath the nearest piece to protect the underside from the wood. You smooth it flat where it has risen slightly at the edge. On the smaller surface opposite the table sits a narrow box with its lid open by a finger's width. Within are spare pens, a few unused ties, and two smooth weights similar to the one on the open text. You do not disturb the contents. You only lower the lid until it rests fully shut. Beside the box lies a second cloth folded over once. You straighten its edge and leave it there. The room grows more settled with each small adjustment. The table now holds only what it should hold. The text has been eased inward. The pen is properly laid aside. The ink is covered. The cloths are folded. The small tray is aligned. Nothing in the chamber calls for more than that. You move back to the stool. Its legs stand unevenly to the line of the table, turned slightly away from the place where someone last rose from it. You place one hand on the top rail and guide it forward until it sits more squarely beneath the work surface. The movement is small but satisfying. Once in place, it looks as though it belongs to the room again rather than to the moment that has just passed through it. Above the table, the shallow shelf keeps its few objects in order. Rolled cloths rest side by side. A stack of narrow boards sits at one end, their edges worn smooth from repeated lifting. Near them lies a slender covered pot and a small brush placed with its bristles turned inward. One length of cord hangs from a peg below the shelf, looped and tucked through itself so it does not fall loose. Nothing there needs touching. It is enough to let the eye pass over it and know that all is ready. The lamp continues with a low, unwavering flame. Its light remains close to the table, giving the work surface a warm center while the edges of the room remain subdued. The wall beyond shows the faint irregularity of plaster in the low glow. The scent of ink has grown quieter now that the dish is shut. What remains nearest is wood, cloth, lamp oil, and the dry stillness of a room no longer in use for the night. Somewhere far back in the building lies the stair, the court, and the weather below, but none of it enters here directly. This chamber keeps its own atmosphere. It feels less like storage and more like the trace of recent hands. A seat drawn back, a pen set down, a line finished, a cover half placed. Now even those traces have been gently brought to rest. You let your gaze travel once more across the table. The open piece is protected. The drying cloth sits folded. The pen lies safely in its rest. The ink dish is closed. The boards and finished pieces stand in a clean row. Nothing more needs setting right. You remain there for a moment longer, with one hand resting lightly against the front edge of the table. The wood is smooth from long use. The warmth from the lamp reaches only the upper surface, leaving the underside cooler where the light does not touch. The room is very still. No current of air moves through it. No footstep sounds in the passage beyond. The hour has gone too far into the night for anything but low flame and settled objects. At last you turn towards the door. From the threshold, the chamber appears complete in a different way than when you entered. Before, it held the shape of paused work. Now it holds the shape of work properly set aside. The lamp remains where it is, low over the table, ready to be lowered further later or found again in the morning. The stool sits in place. The surfaces are clear and prepared. Behind you, the small room remains lit in its quiet circle, with the writing table, the covered ink, the resting pen, and the partly closed text left safely for the day to come. Ahead, the upper passage waits in dimness, leading on towards the final closing of the night. You step back into the upper passage and let the door of the writing chamber rest as you found it, not shut fast, only drawn close enough that the circle of light within remains contained. At once the corridor seems dimmer. The lamp in the room behind you still burns, but its glow now falls only as a narrow band across the threshold and the nearest stretch of floor before fading into the muted air of the passage. Ahead, the wall lamps remain turned low. Their light is enough to hold the corridor in view, though not enough to keep shadow from gathering more fully between one doorway and the next. You begin to walk at the same quiet pace as before. The upper floor feels changed now, not because anything is different in its shape, but because the small tasks within its rooms have been completed one by one. The doors, the thresholds, the low flames, the clear surfaces, the settled objects. Each chamber behind you has taken on the look of a place left properly for the night. You pass the smaller workroom first. Its door stands as you left it, and through the narrow opening you can still see the bench beneath the wall lamp, the trays on the lower table, and the folded cloths resting in their places. The flame above the bench burns lower than the one in the writing room, and now that the work there has been set in order, it seems right to lessen it a little more. You step inside just far enough to reach the bracket. The room remains warm at the center and dim at the edges. Bench, brush, tray, cord, folded linen, all lie ready for morning. You raise your hand to the lamp and turn the wick down by a small measure. The change is immediate but gentle. The light contracts, drawing closer to the bracket and the front edge of the bench. The corners of the chamber deepen slightly, while the working surface remains visible enough for the order of the room to hold. You stand a moment to make sure the flame remains steady. Then you step back into the corridor and let the door rest a little nearer to close than before. Not fully shut, only enough that the reduced light remains within the room and the passage takes back its dimness. Further along, the heavier doorway of the archive room waits in its recess. The hanging cloth still stands drawn back to one side, and beyond it, the deeper chamber holds its low lamp over the bays and sheltered compartments. You do not need to cross the room again. From the threshold alone, you can see that the sliding fronts remain as they should, the line spaces undisturbed, the stand in the corner holding its folded cloth and finer brush in readiness. You reach for the hanging cloth and draw it a little further across the opening. The fabric answers with a soft weight in your hand, heavier than the wrappings used in the other rooms, and falls into a straighter line when released. It does not close the room entirely. A narrow gap remains at one side, enough for air and light to pass lightly through, though the inner chamber now sits more deeply sheltered behind it. The lamp within appears smaller through the cloth-framed opening. Its glow no longer reaches the corridor floor. It remains where it belongs, low among the recessed bays, over the separated cases, and older bundles left back from weather and traffic. Satisfied, you move on. Next comes the first storage room of the upper level. Its partly open door shows only a slim interior line of light now, the cabinet and shelves within reduced to shape more than detail. You place your hand lightly against the wood and ease the door inward by the width of 2 fingers. The movement is enough to narrow the visible gap without sealing the room away entirely. The dry scent within remains. The chest lids, ledge, cabinet, and stored pieces remain untouched. Only the threshold changes, becoming quieter in its appearance, more settled. You continue down the passage towards the bend near the stair. Here the wall niche lamp has been burning for some time, and its flame has already sunk lower of its own accord. The light from it spreads in a shallow oval over the plaster, and the floor beneath, leaving the ceiling and upper corners dark. A small stool stands against the wall nearby where you passed it earlier, and one corner of the folded cloth upon it has slipped a little over the edge. You set it right with one light touch. Then you turn to the lamp. The bronze of the niche is warm near the wick, and darker at the edges where smoke has marked it over long use. You lower the flame slightly, no more than enough to reduce its reach. At once, the patch of light on the floor shrinks. The corridor remains visible, but the longer stretches beyond the bend and back towards the upper rooms give themselves more readily to shadow. You remain there a moment and look back the way you have come. From this point, the upper level appears as a sequence of dim thresholds and softened openings. The writing chamber now keeps its light close to the table within. The smaller workroom glows more faintly behind its nearer drawn door. The archive room is held behind its heavier cloth. The storage chamber shows only the thinnest seam of light. None of the rooms is dark, yet all have withdrawn into themselves. You turn and walk the last short distance to the stairhead. The air changes almost at once. It is not wetter here, only less enclosed. The faint freshness that once vanished in the deeper passage becomes just perceptible again at the top of the stair, and with it comes the most distant suggestion of the rain below, too softened by height and walls to be called a sound, so much as a memory of one. You stop at the head of the descent and rest your hand against the wall. Behind you, the upper rooms now lie in their reduced light, each one prepared and left in order. Before you, the stair drops towards the lower level where the court, the covered walks, and the final shelter of the night still wait. The lamp at the stairhead throws a modest band across the top step and the turn beyond it. Nothing further needs adjusting here. For a few quiet moments, you remain where you are. The passage behind has grown still enough that no separate room seems to stand apart from the others now. They belong to one upper hush. Boards and cloths, pens and trays, chests and compartments, all resting beyond their thresholds in lowered light. The corridor itself seems narrower than before, not by measure, but by dimness. What had been spaces of work have become spaces of rest. At last you lift your hand from the wall. The upper floor is settled. With the last lamps turned lower and the doorways drawn in, you turn towards the stair and begin to leave it behind. You place your foot on the first step and begin the descent from the upper floor. The passage behind you remains in lowered light, its rooms left as they should be, their thresholds dim and undisturbed. Ahead, the stair turns downward through its familiar angle of wall and shadow. The lamp near the top step gives only a modest band of light, enough to guide the way without reaching far below. Your hand rests lightly against the side wall as you go. The plaster is cool and smooth in the places most often touched. The steps beneath your sandals carry the same worn curve at their centers that they held on the way up, though now they seem softer in the reduced light. Sound changes as you descend. At first, it remains close, held by the stairwell and the turn of the walls. Then, little by little, the lower level begins to return around you. The air shifts before the view does. A faint freshness reaches you first, rising from below and carrying with it the far-off weather that the upper rooms had nearly shut away. Then comes the softened murmur of rain from the court, still distant, though clearer than it was above. By the time you pass the lamp niche halfway down, the sound has gathered a little more shape. Water meeting paving, basin, and roof edge somewhere beyond the stairs turn. You continue downward without hurry. At the lower bend, a deeper strip of darkness marks the opening back towards the court. The enclosed scents of the upper floor begin to give way to others more familiar from earlier in the evening. Damp stone at the edge of the air, lamp oil, plaster holding the day's warmth, and the quiet breadth of a larger part of the building beyond. When you reach the last few steps, the lower level opens gradually before you. First, the covered edge of the court appears, then the nearest column, then the darker sheen of the paving beyond. Rain crosses the open square in a fine, steady fall. Its sound is no longer a memory from another floor, but part of the space around you again, though gentler now than when the night first began. You step off the stair and pause. The court has grown deeper in darkness. The basin at its center holds only the faintest glimmer when a nearby lamp catches it. The covered walks around it are quieter than before, their flames turned lower, their openings drawn in. The upper rooms are now behind you, hidden again by passage, turn, and height. Here below, the night feels broader, but no less sheltered. You begin to walk along the covered edge. The stone underfoot is dry close to the wall and cooler nearer the open side. Between the columns, the rain falls in fine lines across the square, breaking the reflections into soft fragments and carrying them away. The lamps that remain burn at long intervals, leaving larger stretches of shadow between them. A bench rests in one recess as you pass. A doorway stands nearly closed. A narrow channel near the wall carries water onward in a dark, continuous thread. You move beyond the reading room entrance and the turn towards the catalog alcove. Those parts of the library now belong to an earlier layer of the evening. What draws you onward is a smaller opening further along the covered side, one set a little back from the main walk, where a low lamp still burns and a sheltered recess faces the court. You slow as you come to it. The entrance is plain, framed by smooth stone and partly screened by the angle of the wall. Inside, the space is neither a full room nor merely an opening in the passage, but something between the two. A side recess deep enough for a wooden bench and a narrow table with an arch left open towards the court so that the air and the sound of the rain may enter without letting the weather in. You step inside. At once the place gathers around you in the gentlest way. The stone beneath the bench is warmer than the paving outside, protected from the night air by the wall at its back. A small lamp burns in a bronze dish upon the narrow table, its flame turned low, so that the light rests close to wood, plaster, and the inner curve of the arch without reaching far beyond. Through the opening, the court remains visible in part. A section of paving, the edge of the basin, the base of one column, and rain falling across them all. You remain standing a moment, letting the change settle. This recess does not hold tools or records or trays. It asks nothing to be put away. Nothing waits to be checked or tied or covered. The bench stands empty. The lamp is already lit. The rain beyond the arch continues at its own pace, and the quiet of the place seems complete without any effort from you at all. You draw a little closer to the opening and rest your hand against the side of the arch. The stone is cool where it faces the court and warmer nearer the inner wall. Its surface has been smoothed by time and passing contact, though faint irregularities remain where the plaster gives way to the underlying form. Outside, water touches the paving in a fine pattern and falls from the roof edge at wider intervals into the basin below. Each drop breaks the surface for a moment, then disappears into widening rings. You turn and sit on the bench. The wood answers with the slightest sound beneath your weight before settling again. Once seated, you let your hands rest loosely in your lap and allow your shoulders to ease. The lamp remains beside you on the narrow table, low enough that its warmth reaches only a little way. Behind your back, the wall holds a quiet, stored heat. In front of you, the court keeps the cooler breath of the rainy night. For a little while, you do nothing more than remain there. The rain has its own patient pattern now. Some drops strike the paving directly. Some fall from the roof edge in slower threads. Some touch the basin and spread in circles too soft to hold for long. Near the wall outside the recess, water moves through a narrow cut in the stone and passes on unseen. None of it asks for attention. It simply continues. The court beyond appears simpler from here than it did while you were crossing it. You no longer follow its paths or look towards doorways. You see only what lies nearest the arch. The pale base of the column, the darkened paving, the edge of the basin catching and losing the lamp's reflection, and the rain traveling through the open center in silver gray lines. The rest belongs to shadow. Beside you, the lamp flame rises low and steady. Its light touches the edge of the table, the grain of the bench, and the lower curve of the wall, then fades into softer dimness further back in the recess. It leaves the outer world untouched. The rain remains itself. The paving remains dark. The night beyond the covered edge remains open and undisturbed. You lean back a little more and let your head rest lightly against the wall. The plaster is firm and faintly cool. Your breathing settles into an easier rhythm. The work of the evening no longer follows you forward from room to room. It has fallen away behind you, not forgotten, simply finished. The upper passages, the writing table, the folded linens, the shelves, the deeper bays, all remain where they are, left in their proper state and needing nothing further from your hands. Here, there is only this sheltered corner. Wood beneath you, stone at your back, lamp beside you, rain beyond the arch. A little breeze reaches in now, and then from the court, just enough to touch your face and the backs of your hands before fading again into the warmer stillness near the wall. When it comes, it carries the clean mineral scent of wet stone and basin water. When it passes, the softer scent of lamp oil and dry wood returns. Time loosens here. You no longer feel the shape of the corridors or the order of the rooms. The evening is no longer a sequence of tasks. It is simply the hour as it is now. Low light, rain on stone, a bench beneath shelter, and nothing that needs to be done before rest can begin. Somewhere beyond the visible edge of the court, another lamp burns lower, and lower until its light almost disappears. You do not watch it directly. You only notice after a while that the shadows between the columns have thickened and the basin shows less reflection than before. The darkness does not feel empty as it gathers. It feels soft, as though the building has drawn its night more closely around itself. You remain where you are. The rain continues. The lamp holds. The bench stays warm beneath you. The basin receives each drop and lets it go. If your thoughts drift, the court remains before you. If they quieten, the rain continues whether you listen to it closely or not. The recess asks nothing of you beyond staying still enough to be held by it. After a time, you let one hand rest along the bench beside you. The wood is smooth beneath your fingers, worn gently by use. Near the edge closest to the arch, it is a little cooler. Nearer the wall, it still holds a trace of warmth. Small things like that are enough now. The grain beneath your fingertips, the change in air between the arch and the inner wall, the low reach of the lamp, the faint, dark movement of water beyond. The night has come fully into the library, not as a closing of something abrupt, but as a gradual settling over stone, wood, plaster, oil, cloth, and rain. It rests in the court, in the passages, in the upper rooms left behind, and here in the sheltered recess where nothing more is required. You sit a little longer with the rain before you. The basin gathers rings and releases them. The paving shines and darkens again. The column holds its pale line in the dimness. The lamp beside you keeps its small circle of light. And within that quiet shelter, with the library at rest around you, and the rainy night moving gently through the court, the evening comes to its final stillness.